I no fear, Hippie Heroes here, and today we are going to see what appears on my YouTube recommendations. I'm watching a video by Goodbye Dom talking about the rise and falls of Scourge Hooks. Haven't really watched this content creator before, but I'm all for like discussing Scourge Hooks and what's good about them, what's bad about them. So let's dive on into it.
So if you clicked on this video, I assume you've played Dead by Daylight at some point in your life, and if you have, you know that it's notorious for having a stale gameplay loop. But there's so many moving parts within each game that that's what keeps players coming back. Sure, the actual gameplay loop at face value might be repetitive, but there's an unfathomable amount of moving parts. From killer power to items to offerings, add-ons, map choice, tile spawns, basement and hatch spawns, and all 20 perks that are being brought into each trial, the appeal to many people, including myself, of Dead by Daylight is that two games rarely feel the exact same. But obviously, if they have the curse of a boring gameplay loop, they need to do a lot more than that to keep players coming back to their game. That's why we have these constant meta shakeups, perk tweaks,
Mmm.
reworks, map updates, new killers, new
Ooh,
survivors with 6 new perks every couple of months.
that's
And when the
rough to
game
look
feels
at.
incredibly stale still, even with all of that, that's where behavior usually implements a new
Can you see my
mechanic.
whole
In
face red?
2016, we had hexes introduced. 2021, we had boons, as well as the mechanic we'll talk about today. 2022, we had the teamwork mechanic. Alright. In 2023, we had Invocation. But like I said, there was another mechanic that was introduced in 2021 that I personally believe is the best mechanic DBD has ever implemented. That being the Scourge Hook. The Scourge mechanic was first introduced on September 7th, 2021, with the release of the Hellraiser chapter. This release brought the Cenobite and his 3 perks, Deadlock, Plaything, and of course, Scourge Hook, Gift of Pain. I have said since the release of this perk that it's an incredibly underrated Scourge and deserves
Is
more love, but in the last couple of weeks, Gift of Pain has actually skyrocketed in pick rate because of its synergy with Leverage. Also, I
mm-hmm.
cannot stress enough how impactful
In
Pinhead's
the
release
Ots
was to Dead
video.
by Daylight. His perks, the killer himself, and the fact that Artist would release directly after, in my opinion, those were and still are the 2 most impactful chapter releases in DBD history in terms of killer metas. And it also gave us 2 Scourges. Gift of Pain was a great first exposure to Scourges, and it taught people about the mechanic, but the next Scourge to release would solidify Scourges as a meta choice from 2021 until now. But this time, it was an original killer designed by Behavior themselves. Not only were we given another very viable, very strong killer out the gate like we were with Pinhead, but we were also given 3 more incredibly strong perks. Grim Embrace, Hex Pentimento, and the one and only Scourge Hook Pain Resonance. Now, Pain Resonance in and of itself, I can make a 40-minute video
Now that I think about it, all of our perks are really, really good. Every one of them has made a huge impact on the meta.
on. It's had reworks, it's had countless tweaks, very strange synergies, and no matter how hard Behavior wanted to nerf the Pain Man synergy, it still exists to this day. Pain Man's being Dead Man's Switch and Pain Res, which I have a full video on Dead Man's if you'd like to go watch that. Again, I know I'm being repetitive, but I cannot stress how impactful these 2 releases were in succession. But even just looking at Scourge perks here, because we could obviously look at the synergies of Plaything and Pentimento and how they still affect us to this day, but that's not what this video is about. So back to the Scourge hooks. At this time, Scourges were in nearly every single game. People were stacking Pain Res with Gift of Pain, with Dead Man's Switch in their back pocket. At the time, these 3 perks together granted passive gen slowdown and regression, passive gen intel, passive healing and repair speed debuffs, and you still had a 4th perk slot open, which you often saw Plaything or Deadlock take the spot of. Notice how that entire meta was fueled by the last 2 releases. I don't think I could name another 2 releases that have had multiple metas created off of their 6 perks alone. So, at this point, Scourges were very well implemented and well received by killers. So, how would Behavior follow up on this mechanic's success? The 3rd and final original Scourge to be added to DBD was on March 8th, 2022, with the release of the Ring chapter, which brought us the Onryo and her 3 perks, Merciless Storm, Call of Brine, and Scourge Hook, Floods of Rage. Now, this Scourge was definitely received a bit differently overall in the eyes of killer players, and that's not to say this isn't a fantastic Scourge Hook. They were clearly focusing more on passive.
It was, and the thing about Floods of Rage is for like the longest time, I thought it would help me tunnel survivors out, but it shows other survivors, which is not very helpful.
But specifically, Call of Brine. The introduction of Call of Brine would bring out the true potential of many other existing gen kick perks in the game, and would only add more fuel to the gen kick meta that was gradually increasing in popularity. This meta would reach its peak later that year with the introduction of Knight and his perk Nowhere to Hide. That would create Overcharge, Call of Brine, Eruption, Nowhere to Hide, which is a build that to this day still brings a chill to a lot of folks who lived through it. It was just one of the most mind-numbing metas to play and to play against. A survivor goes down and now all of a sudden you're incapacitated for 12 seconds. But then on Killer, your entire incentive was to just go kick gens and ignore survivors completely because of how strong medkits and boons were at that time. It was just a horrible time in Dead by Daylight. I've been playing since the Twins chapter, and I can confidently say that is the worst this game has ever felt. But that brings us.
Honestly, I enjoy that meta just because it gave something different. I started the game when Armrio came out, and gen kits weren't that impactful, and then all of a sudden they started getting them more and more impactful, and they were interesting. There was some really interesting combos, and I miss being able to apply Incapacitate on survivors. I feel like there should be more perks that really apply Incapacitated. So you can't work on gens, you can't heal. I don't even think you can do totems with Incapacitated, but I really want there to be some form of Incapacitated in the game. Even if it's like I don't want it to be like super strong, but I feel like a good 20-25 seconds would be very ideal, very nice.
Us back to the point of this video. Though Floods of Rage is and has always been a very viable perk, it was released with an incredibly powerful gen kick that also granted you intel, which would be Call of Brine obviously, but also Merciless Storm caused a lot of discussion when it first released. Not because it
Ooh, a
was
nice
overpowered
grab.
or anything like that, but a lot of people just thought it was funny. So there were definitely a lot more people talking about Merciless Storm and Call of Brine than Floods of Rage. So Floods of Rage
True.
was never a bad perk, and has never been a bad perk. It was overshadowed by the other two perks Onryo had, but also it was overshadowed by the other Scourge hooks that already
Yeah.
existed. As someone that played release day of all of these Scourge releases, Floods of Rage objectively had the least discussion about it when it first released. Now, that brings us to March 8th,
Pretty nobody talked
2022,
about
which
it.
is, like I said earlier, the last time an original Scourge was released. Once these three Scourge perks were released, we didn't hear much after. And then Behavior came back with this bright idea on what to do with Scourge hooks.
Okay, so make sure you subscribe to my YouTube. Maybe then I can afford you to a premium, less advertisements for everything. Everything just goes smoother with it. What was the right idea?
So, like I said earlier, Scourge hooks had two very different identities. We had the original Holy Trinity of Pain Res, Gift of Pain, and Floods of Rage, which I still believe are all fantastically designed perks. Perks like Gift of Pain and Pain Res actually incentivize the killer to tunnel less in order to get more value out of the perks. Floods of Rage offered this very interesting and unique moment of intel in comparison to other intel perks in this game, the trade-off being you don't control when it happens, but you reveal all 4 survivors. Again, great perk. But with the Holy Trinity
It's
released and
decent.
well accepted, this is where the new identity of Scourges came to be. Scourges from this point forward would serve no other purpose than to become a rework mechanic for perks that Behavior wasn't really sure what to do with. Even though those 3 original Scourges were released within a year of each other, Behavior would never release another Scourge hook from March 2022 all the way up until present day.
True.
And with this incredible
40% of
original
Scourge
mechanic now
perks are
becoming a
reworked.
balancing tool and nothing more, we were given one great rework and one of the funniest, most laughable jokes within the community of a rework. Obviously, let's start with the positives here. Monstrous Shrine was a fantastic change. Monstrous Shrine had been sitting in the game since release, relatively untouched by players. It's a perk that made you die on hook faster and also gave you more penalties for throwing your hooks. But again, it was only the hooks in the basement. This was a great change to turn this into a Scourge because what it did was it turned all the basement hooks into Scourges, meaning if you're running Pain Res, Floods of Rage, Gift of Pain, all those basement hooks count now too, so now you have 8 Scourge hooks on the map. Not
Mm-hmm.
only that, but those 4 other Scourge hooks that are around the map that aren't in basement also get Monstrous Shrine's benefits. Overall, this was a fantastic change. I have no bad things to say about it. My only
Yeah,
comment
it's
about
very
it is that
wonderful.
after the 70-second hook timer change, up from 60 seconds, Monster Shrine just really doesn't have a place anymore, in my opinion. Do I think it's a well-designed perk?
Unfortunately.
Yes. But do I think only having 4 perk slots makes it very difficult for me to choose this over other perks? Absolutely. And then we were hit with the most laughable excuse of a rework that
Street
not
needs a
only
buff.
had people confused, but had people laughing on social media. When this rework hit, it reminded me so much of release day Quick Gambit, because I just had to put my head in my hands and go, what the fuck were you thinking? So we know the previous rework for Monster Shrine was great because it used a hook perk and transformed it into a scourge, and it was a bunch of benefits all around. Now imagine reworking a different hook perk that behavior wasn't sure what to do with, and making it worse. And if you're this far into a video like this, I assume you already know what perk I'm talking about, which would be Hangman's
Deadman
Trick.
Street.
Before the rework,
Uh,
Hangman's
Hangman's
Trick
Trick.
gave you a loud noise notification when a
I don't
survivor
know why I thought it
began
was Deadman
soloing, but
Switch.
also if you were carrying a survivor and a survivor was within 6 meters of any
I
hook
was
on the
thinking of
entire
this
map,
one.
it revealed them. Pretty niche perk, definitely better intel in this game, but it's not that bad, right? It's kind of like a long distance awakened awareness. I know that's a reach, but just stay with me. And this was the exact moment that Scourge hooks kind of became a joke, and the perception of them shifted from really unique, interesting hook perks to a shitty rework mechanic. This is what really blows my mind, okay? After the rework of Hangman's Trick, you now, when carrying a survivor, you now see survivors within 12 meters of a hook. That's really good, right? That's double the range we used to have. This perk could be viable, and it's not that strong because it's only when you're carrying a survivor. But then you look and you realize it's only for Scourge hooks. So let me get this straight. Behavior takes one of their best mechanics, the Scourge mechanic, applies it to Hangman's Trick, one of their notoriously worst perks with the lowest pick rates, and they shift it from a perk where you can see survivors near any hook on the map when carrying
corner
a
taken.
survivor, to seeing survivors around 4 hooks on the map. And you might be saying, well, yes, Dom, but also they double the range. My question to you then, so what? The 6 meter to 12 meter change did not make up for the fact that it's only 4 hooks on the map now. They took a bad perk and made it worse. I will never get over how stupid of a change that was. Especially because they said when they were reworking this that they wanted it to fill a niche that other perks don't fill. Are you serious? And this came out July 25th, 2023, okay? The last original Scourge was released in March of 2022. People, including myself, were waiting a long time for a new Scourge hook. This is what we get? Are you joking? So Behavior releases Scourge hooks, gives us 3 bangers out the gate. Even when they get nerfed and rebalanced, they're still very viable perks. Pain Res will never not be meta. For the first time since its release, Gift of Pain's pick rate is skyrocketing right now as we speak. Floods of Rage even fills a niche within perks that other perks don't. And then it turns into this rework mechanic that is used for Monster Shrine, which was a great start and gave us some hope that maybe we'll get more Scourges down the line. And then you take one of the notoriously worst perks in the game and turn it into a worst perk. I just want to know what they were thinking. It is a laughable history, which is why I wanted to make this video. How do we go from Pain Res to Hangman's Trick? Okay, I know I'm being annoying, but it just shows I care, okay? I'm very passionate about Scourge hooks, I guess. And of course, this is where the discussion is going to shift to you guys, okay? My questions for you is, 1, why do you think they stopped creating original Scourges? And 2, what are some Scourges you would like to see if they ever brought them back? For the first question, my answer would be that maybe it proved to be very hard to balance a perk that isn't overpowered as a Scourge, that also feels like it's worth using. Because of how Scourge perks passively grant the killer the use of their perk while also depending on hook RNG to be useful at all, thinking of and designing perks that don't feel overpowered but still feel worth taking up one of your perk slots might be really difficult. Obviously, this sounds very similar to Hex perks, but you can't cleanse a Scourge hook. You can use Saboteur to see them and pre-sabo, but they come back. I just believe this is where complications came in. Even though Scourges came out the gate incredibly promising, they never really reached the peak of their design ever again, which is why I think maybe they just started struggling thinking of perks that didn't feel completely useless when hook RNG was bad, but also didn't feel completely overpowered when Hook RNG was good. I think maybe this issue potentially discouraged behavior to design and implement more Scourges when none of their newer or reworked Scourges were ever as popular as the original three. And then what are some Scourges I'd like to see? Guys, don't take this at face value. This would be funny. I don't think it would be balanced in any way. But I'd love to see Scourge that shifts an active hex spawn on each hook, or maybe each unhook. Like, for example, if no survivor is currently interacting with it, one random hex from the hook
Oh,
will switch spots when a survivor is hooked on a Scourge. Could you imagine Ruin Undying, or maybe multiple stacks of Pentimento, moving around the map? That would be an absolute nightmare of balancing and design, but I think it could be quite silly. So I'd love for y'all to comment down below a Scourge hook you'd like to see and why you think they abandoned Scourges in the first place. And behavior, if you can hear me, I know you can't, I'm just coping. Please, please bring back Scourge hooks.
okay, that's a pretty interesting video talking about the history of Scourge hooks. Watching it, I was able to come up with some different opinions. Yeah, it's interesting how Scourge hooks went to being so strong and incredibly well designed, and how they were even able to change bad perks into Scourge hooks and make them better, like Monstrous Shrine, but messed up Pid's perk. Um, I would say, as far as perks I would like to see, I would really like to see perks that the main one I would like to see is I would like to see a Scourge hook where you hook a survivor, and then after you leave a certain range, kind of like Grim Embrace, instead of Grim Embrace activating, you get 1% faster. And that's until the unhook happens, and then you lose that 1%. It's not too much, but just enough to have a little bit of a fun haste effect. I don't think it'd be anything as significant as made for this, and it requires has actual requirement, unlike Old Made for this, where Old Made for this was way too easy to perform. And it can be a deactivated, which I think would balance it out pretty well. Um, my other one is, I know how I was mentioning incapacitated earlier. I would like to see his courage hit for incapacitated, where it gives them like, I think 20 seconds of incapacitated should be balanced, maybe at 225. If it needs to be reduced, I would say reduce it to 15. Just make it impactful, but not overly power like the 3 gem meta was. I think that would be, and have it only work on like injured survivors as well. I think that would be a very, very fun effect as well. Um, Another Scourge hook I would like to see is something like reinforced Scourge hook, where if a survivor tries to sabo it, it takes longer to sabo, and maybe some type of artifact to throw on top of it. I think that would be real good. As far as Pitts Park, I just think it should be reverted back to the way it was and increase the distance instead of like from 6 to 12, like which they did. I think 8 meters should be fine, and that should really help out a lot of people. And just be good aura read in general, I feel like, across the whole entire map. Um, but that is all I have for y'all today. This was a really good video. I did like it. I enjoyed watching this content creator, hearing his thoughts and opinions. He did a very good job discussing the history of Gertrude's. Not the biggest fan of the filters. I've always kind of disliked filters, especially when they blind you with red. I'm not colorblind. I can see red very, very well. Um, so I know why people do it. They say it makes them feel like they have an advantage, which I don't really see it. But other than that, it was a very well organized video. I like the sequences of him showing off the different killers, like Cenobite trailers and ours trailer. I thought all that was real cool. And make sure you give him a like and follow. He's a great content creator, looks like. And I will see y'all around in the fog. So y'all have a great and wonderful day. Bye bye.